Wish you could read body language like a pro? Well, today is your lucky day. I just had an awesome conversation with Scott Rouse. He is a behavior analyst and body language expert that's trained alongside the FBI, Secret Service, and much, much more. Want to know how to tell if someone is lying to you? We cover it. Want to make sure that you aren't displaying signs of dishonesty? We cover that. And you want to know how to figure out what's coming next by always being prepared? You betcha. We cover that as well. So get ready and strap in and learn how to become a body language master.
Hello, everyone. I am extremely excited. Today we have Mr. Scott Rouse on the show. He is a behavior analyst and body language expert. He holds multiple certifications in advanced interrogation training and is trained alongside the FBI, the Secret Service, the U.S. Military Intelligence, and the Department of Defense. He's worked as a consultant for law enforcement, as well as CEOs, attorneys, executives, financial advisors, and entertainers. Scott has an incredible TED Talk, which is one of my favorites, How to Kill Your Inner Body Language Frankenstein, and an incredibly interesting short film that we just watched the other day called Lie Strong, about Lance Armstrong's body language, which was decoded. And we're very happy that you've taken the time to be with us here today. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You've talked to a couple of friends of mine. I think Mark Bowden is one of the guys you talked to. How was that? Did that go really well?
That was a lot of fun. Mark's a character and a half.
You absolutely love him, though, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody does. Everybody does.
Oh, yeah. Now, for those of you who have no idea who you are, why don't you tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement in the military in body language and interrogation. I also train CEOs and entrepreneurs, all kinds of people in the same kind of stuff. Not exactly the same, not the same, not interrogation, obviously, for the civilians, but pretty much the same stuff for body language. There's a little more intricate things when it comes to what's going to happen next when you start talking to the military or especially law enforcement and body language. Then you get into with civilians, but it's all pretty much the same stuff. It's a lot of it, but it's all pretty much the same.
Fantastic. Now, how did you get into this interesting career path?
When I was a little kid, my father's a doctor, and we lived in a little town called Louisa, Kentucky. And at the time, he was about the only doctor there. And the town didn't have very many people in it at all. It's really, really small, little, almost like a coal mining town in eastern Kentucky. And my mom would take my sister and my brother and I to eat lunch with my dad at the hospital, which is really just this big old house. And she'd bring lunch, and we'd all sit. It might have been like a big closet or something we were sitting in. I don't know, but it was made into his office. And the waiting room was like, I guess would be what the biggest room was like the living room or something. And one morning we went in there, and I guess I was 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8. And I saw two friends of mine from school sitting in the office. And I said to my dad, however you say it as a little kid, I said, it was Billy Meade and Robert Bellamy. If they're watching this, what's up? But they were in there. And I said, well, what's wrong with Billy and Robert? My dad said, well, he looked out the door and he said, well, Robert has an earache and he's been up all night with his mother. He said, Billy, he's not sick. He's just pretending to be sick so he doesn't have to go to school. And I thought, well, this is, how do you know this? I thought, well, this is magic. He said, well, look at Robert's mother. He said, see how she doesn't look like she's rested. She looks kind of tired. Her hair doesn't look, as good as it probably should and usually does. This is however you say it to a kid. I don't remember specifically the vernacular he used. And I said, yeah. And he said, we see how Robert's holding his ear and he's leaning on his mother because he's doing this and leaning on his mom. And I said, yeah. He said, that tells me it's an earache. Duh. But I didn't know as a kid. And he said, and you can also see his mom's been up for a long time. She hadn't slept very well. I said, oh. And I said, well, so how can you tell that about Billy? Billy and me. And he said, well, look at Billy. And he was sitting on a little bench. His mother was sitting beside him. Excuse me. And he said, Billy's legs, see how they're kind of dangling there over the bench? And I said, yeah. He said, now, see how he's reading that little magazine or looking at the magazine? I said, yeah. He said, now, in a minute, here's what's going to happen. His mother's going to say something to him. And his face is going to go from his eyebrows being up and looking at that magazine. His eyebrows are going to go down like this. And he's going to make sort of a sad face. He's going to look sideways up at his mother. And then she's going to say something to him, and she'll pat him a little bit on the side. And then he'll straighten up and go back to what he was doing. And in about 2 or 3 minutes, that actually happened. I about fell on the floor. I was like, this is magic. How do you do this? Where do you learn this? And he explained to me his bedside manner. You just get used to seeing those things. And it's big. It was the big stuff. You know, if somebody had a hurt leg, they'd limp. And I go, what's wrong with this guy? Some of his legs hurt. You know, he'd limp. So it's the fascination of it started there. And just sort of even when I couldn't read very well as a kid or understand quote unquote research, my dad would explain it to me and say, here's why this person does that. Or we'd be in the mall or something. We didn't have malls back then. But we'd be in a store or something, and my mom or my dad would say, see that person? They are doing this because they feel this way. And that's why you're seeing them act this way. And it was really, for me, it's fascinating. It just never went away. It's like seeing your first magic trick and always wanting to learn about magic tricks, I guess, you know, same kind of thing. So that's where it started, and just went on from there, just for years and years and years and years and years. I just kept learning about it and reading everything I could. There's not a college with like the training to a body language expert. You can get in the psychology section of things, and that's great because it talks about how the brain works and the brain and all that. And you can get to the neurological side of it and become a brain surgeon or something, or a psychiatrist or something. But I didn't want to get into those type of things. But there was nothing you could learn in college and stuff. So it was sort of, most everyone I know that's in the same kind of business I'm in, they're self-educated. You know, they learn from, there wasn't a college to go to, although you can learn some things at college, but there's nothing specifically about nonverbal communication and body language you can learn. So you sort of have to teach yourself as you go along. So I've just sort of educated myself with the help of other people when I was a little kid as well to educate myself. So
absolutely. It's tying into that power of observation that most people go on autopilot and they don't pay any attention to anything else.
Yeah. The important thing is to pay attention to everything that's going on around you. Every time when my wife leaves the house, it's the last thing I say. I say, I love you, and pay attention to everything going on around you. I will, I do. And she does. She's a private investigator, so her lifestyle and life sort of leans toward that being aware anyway. But I still say it. You know, my parents would say it to me when we were little. You know, pay attention to what's going on around you. So when it's kind of odd if I go out to eat lunch with somebody, or if we're eating supper all the time, I'm checking everybody that comes in the room, but I have friends that do that as well, who obviously didn't grow up with me, but they're still checking and being aware of everything as well. And that's the thing about being observant. You have to really pay attention to what's going on around you, and just in case somebody's doing something or getting ready to do something that might not be good for you or your family, without being paranoid. You know, you kind of have to, you weigh those two things, but you just kind of make yourself aware of what's going on. That's why observation is the root of all this, is the key to everything when it comes to body language and nonverbal communication.
Yeah, it's that situational awareness of everything. Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say, what part of reading or understanding body language do you find is most overlooked, or like some of the biggest mistakes?
The biggest mistakes I've seen, and I work with a lot of people who've come across a con man or been conned out of something. That could be companies or specific people, business people, banks, those types of things. You deal with embezzlers and all that. What they miss the most is you'll accept that person at first. Things will seem fine. They'll seem great and they'll seem normal, and your brain will say, okay, there's nothing here that's like some of the things that Mark talked about. I'm sure it would tell you that, you know, they'll do things that aren't even, that aren't balanced. So their body language doesn't look symmetric. Everything's kind of off and looks weird. And your brain doesn't see maybe those things when it's looking weird, and doesn't register to tell you something's not right here. And as time goes on, they'll be fine at first. And they'd be fine for years. But then their approach to the money, or their approach to the business, their approach to you may change. And you may not see that. They may start acting differently. You've got a huge baseline on somebody. You know how they act when you talk about, you know, the winter or being too cold or too hot. You know the way these people act. And when you start talking about things that are supposed to make them uncomfortable, or that do make them uncomfortable, you know how they act. But as time goes along, people accept the way people are, and they say, well, he's just acting that way. I know that guy. And they still don't continue to watch their body language, nonverbal cues that'll tell them something has changed, something's wrong. Someone they work with, or someone that works where they work, something's just not right there. And it could be anything from them being a con and setting this thing up for years, and some of them do that, to someone who could be an on-site shooter, an on-site killer. You know, they could change their mind about a lot of things, and things could happen, and they could start shutting down, and there's a specific few things they'll start doing that'll show you, you know, heads up, watch out for this person. But the big problem is people accept someone at first, the first 6 months even, and then for years they'll accept them as that, and it'll go on no matter what they do. It'll be just fine. They won't see these little things that stick out, little red flags and bells and whistles that say something's up. Look out for this or this person.
Gotcha. And that's, I think that ties in perfectly to your blog, which is focused on what's going to happen next.
Right.
If they categorize them right away and put them on the shelf, they're not paying attention to those little things. So
right.
What are some of those cues? I know you said like some things that are different here or they change. What are some specific things to look for, say if someone is lying to you or being untruthful?
One of the things most people, let me ask you this. When you're trying to decide whether somebody's lying to you or not, what do they do that tells you say, oh, here's what happened? And your wife says, why do you think he's lying to you? And you'd say, but I asked him a question, he did this. What would that be? Does that make sense? Like, is there something specific they would do?
That they would do that would sort of be a tell to me?
Yeah.
I think one of the big things is, either answering a question overly quickly or pondering it more so than it should, given the question at hand, where
exactly.
Those wheels are spinning too much.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. They've already got the answer rehearsed and they're ready to give it to you because they know you're going to ask it, or they're trying to think up what that answer is. One of the big ones is a lot of people say, "Oh, I think he was lying because he broke eye contact or she broke eye contact with me when they were talking." In reality, that's not true at all. I mean, they may break eye contact with you, but more often than not, the person who's not being honest with you, who's telling you a lie, who's deceiving you, trying to get out of something, they're going to look right at you the whole time. And they're not going to blink very much either, because they want to make sure you're believing what they tell them. Because if I ask you a question, is that, did you light that car on fire that set the house on fire by accident and hurt somebody in the house? I said, did you do that? And you started doing things that told me, let's say I'm, well, that's a good scenario. And so you're telling me the answer as I'm telling you the answer. I want to look at you. So if you go like this, you start making faces that tell me or tell you that the other person that you don't believe them, or it sounds kind of weird, then the person who's not telling the truth will start adding things to it. They'll start trying to prop that thing up, prop up their lie or their deceptive statement, whatever it is. And that's one way you can tell. Another thing is, if you pay attention to the way people answer things, if I say, hey, Brandon, you want to go to Arby's? And you said, no, I do not. Nobody talks that way. Nobody says, no, I do not. You want a glass of water? No, I do not. Whatever. They'll contract things. They'll say, you want to go to Arby's? And you'd probably say, no, I don't want to. No, thanks. Anyway, let's not go there. Let's go somewhere else. Or, yeah, sure, let's go to Arby's. You wouldn't say, no, I do not, or yes, I do. And when you hear those answers like that aren't contracted, that should be a little cue to let you know someone has been rehearsed. It's almost like packaged information that you're getting from someone. And it's like they've been rehearsing in their mind. In interrogations, if you watch people before you go in and talk to them for a little while, sometimes you'll see them actually say out loud, and they'll rock back and forth and say, no, I did not. Did you do so? No, I did not. And you'll hear them saying that and rehearsing their answer. And you say, hey, did you light the car on fire? And then they'll say, no, I did not. And like you said, they go, no, I did not. Not that fast, but they'll come out a little bit too fast, Or if you surprise them with something, and they think you're going to ask about the car, but you ask about shooting somebody at a liquor store before that, and they did it, but they didn't think you had connected them with it, they may take a minute to react. Because there's three things your brain's got to do before you start lying. Because as soon as you get the question, your brain goes, hang on a second, we can't tell the truth about this. And you go, so let's see. So there's the first thing that happens. Your brain pauses and tries not to tell the truth. Then you have to think the lie up. You got to think, okay, no, I didn't do that. So I'll tell them I wasn't there at 8:30. I was there at 12. Yeah. So you're ready to deliver it. And then when you deliver that information, that's where the action is where when they say, no, I did it. I was there at 12 o'clock, not 10. And they start doing little things that tell you something's not right. They stare at you and their eyes get a little bit wide and they don't blink much. Doesn't mean they're lying. There are no absolutes when it comes to body language and nonverbal communication. But there's some things that will tell you something's just not right. Your brain will let you know. There's certain parts of your brain that will say, something's not right here. I don't know what it is yet, but something's not okay. Heads up. Pay attention.
Right. And like you said, it's a lot more than just answering or eye contact. It's that cluster of information, taking in the whole context of what's happening
Exactly.
to
In
make
real time.
decisions.
That's the key.
Very nice. Now in your workbook, Body Language Tactics for Business, you go over some meeting negotiations, introductions. So what are some of the key takeaways for something like a negotiation where you can tell if you're pushing too hard or not pushing enough?
One of the big things, and it's easy to miss, is when someone doesn't agree with what you're talking about. A lot of times they'll purse their lips. They'll really quickly do it like that. It'd be really, you may not see it, they may go as they're thinking about it. It doesn't mean every time you see that they don't agree with you, but most likely if it's really quick, they're thinking, I don't like that, but they're just listening. So that's one thing we'll tell you in negotiations where they're actually into what you're talking about specific points in a negotiation. You've got point 1, 2, and 3, and they really don't like point 2, but they really like 1, and they like 3. When it comes to 2, they may purse their lips a little bit. So you can sort of hold that back and pretend like it's important, even though it's not important. And since they don't like it, you can say, well, we won't do that one if you'll do this in the rest of the negotiation, or have you, whatever the deal is.
Very nice. Yeah, it does indeed. And once again, it keeps coming back to that same point of being observant and being in the moment. And I think that's one thing that with our students is a bit of a challenge of being in their head and trying to decode what other people are doing, but also staying in the moment and being present. So they're not seeing like this rendering.
Oh yeah.
Now I can speak again.
Yeah, because that lets the person that you're talking to that's doing that, if you're, like you said, rendering things going on in your mind, a lot of times people get their resting face will just go to like that as they're talking, to start looking weird as they're thinking while you're talking to them. So that lets them know something's up, or, why are you acting weird? And you may suspect them of something, but you don't want them to know you suspect something yet. But as they're talking, you're going, you got to be cool about how you approach those situations. So,
right. And I think that's something that's a skill that to be able to observe and then continuing to ask the right questions on the fly. Is that something that just has to be done with practice, or are there some shortcuts that to make that seem more natural?
Well, you just have to do it over and over and over. And the great thing about this is you can practice this stuff anywhere. And you can go out, you can go to the mall, you can go down to, Arby's again, or wherever you want to go, and whoever or a restaurant, and ask the waitress. Like sometimes they'll say, oh, the whatever, what's good? What do you got today? What would you get? Oh, today we have the whatever it is. And I always say, did you, is that good? And when they tell me, I can usually tell if they have it or have had it or not. And I'll say, you never even had that. How do you know? And they'll say, oh, you're right. And they'll go, here's what it's, nobody really likes it, or they love it, but I just haven't tried it yet, or I don't eat meat, or something like that. So you can rehearse on those people and ask them. They're not going to remember you. They may, and you may go back and go, there's that guy that always asks questions about whatever. And that's okay. Who cares? But you can rehearse anywhere. I mean, the car wash and, store, anywhere. Just whoever you come in contact with, just watch what's going on and ask them about something. Say, are you the one that works at, let's say you're at the grocery store and you're someone standing there in front of you and you got a couple of minutes. My wife hates it when I do this, but I do it anyway. I'll say, hey, I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you from? And they'll say, I don't know. And I'll start naming things. You can tell the way they're thinking, but I just like doing that. If they're going to say, I think I remember you too. And I know I don't know this person. I like to see what that reaction looks like. I've done that for, way too long, I'm sure, but that's, you can rehearse it anywhere. You can practice anywhere on anybody, really.
I think you hit on a big subject there, not only just in the body language realm, but in the fact of starting conversations, talking to people that, we put so much pressure on. I have to say the right thing. I have to do the right thing. Yeah. People don't remember those minute little conversations, whether it's a low stakes environment, like you said, at the mall or standing in line at the grocery store. Those are perfect times to practice. So when it comes to that negotiation or interrogation or that important event, you've worked on those skills before.
Yeah. You're ready for them. And you know what kind of questions to ask, and you know what kind of the questions people kind of, recoil from, or if it's too much to ask, or you may ask almost enough and give them almost enough information for your question, but they may not understand it, and you'll see what they look like when they don't understand it. It sounds like I'm nuts, but everybody I know that's in this does this as well. When you start talking about it, it sounds kind of weird, but we talk about it, freely, openly. I think you're going to talk to Greg Hartley, ask him about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
When we go out to eat or something, it's hilarious because we'll sit there and people, we don't even, a lot of times we won't eat, we'll just be looking around talking, you can tell who's on a date for the first time, who's not getting along, who hasn't been talking to each other for a while, they've been married for a long time. And is that good or bad? Sometimes they're just used to being with each other. Sometimes one's got a problem, and you see people sneaking around. That's one of the biggies we always like to spot, is that type of thing. So even though it sounds odd, and people who start getting into body language and start trying to understand it and say, oh, I can actually use this as a tool for real from a scientific point of view. When you start doing those things, it gets kind of, you start thinking, this is kind of weird. Nobody does this. People are trying to do that. They just don't know how. And, but people who are just getting into body language or educating themselves about it, or who've been into it, who are avid fans of nonverbal communication, they'll always be doing those types of things. They'll say, I don't think that guy does. And a lot of times it sounds like little old women, talking at lunch. Look at so-and-so. I think that guy over there does this or that. And my wife is the same, and I are the same way. Because she's advanced in body language and nonverbal communication as well in her job. And it's one of those things we'll talk around and we'll talk and we'll just almost bet on what's going on in the situation with a couple or a person, or if they're waiting on somebody, if they're not waiting on somebody, who's showing up. Is it a guy, or is it their girlfriend and they're waiting on? Is it their wife? Is it who are they waiting on? That type of thing. So it's all the way. You can tell I get all fired up about it when I start talking about it. It's like magic tricks.
It's like a game, you get to create that. You create that story just on what they're saying from their body language.
Yeah, exactly. And find out if you're right or not. That's the key.
Yeah.
So,
Now, if someone is new, and they're curious or they want to learn about body language, and say they go to a coffee shop or a diner and they're looking around, what are some of the things that they can look for that are going to be easier to let them know that they're right or wrong? Some of those telltale signs.
Let's say, for example, you see a guy and a girl sitting at a table, and usually most people are under the impression they see somebody like that, they're together. But a lot of times it'll be something from one of the date and match or one of those types of things, and you can tell if it's a first date. A lot of times, and sometimes the girl will be into the guy, but the guy won't be into the girl, or vice versa. One of my here talk about my wife and what girls think. But my wife is one of those who sees a girl and she starts doing her hair like this and talking to a guy, you can tell they've got a crush on him because of the way they act. There are things that they'll do. They'll start talking. They'll lean forward a little bit and they'll pull their hair behind their ear and they'll talk. And they'll usually show you part of their neck. And that's one of those things as an animal you want to do to show that you're vulnerable and all that. But you can see all kinds of things. If two people are sitting side by side and they've been together for a long time, really long time, a lot of times they'll lean, their head will be like mine, it'll be like lean toward them a little bit or something. People who are fairly young and they're married, and they may have been married 4 or 5 years, or married like not as long as you have even, because it's all new still, then they'll be leaning a little bit more hardcore toward each other. It's something if you pay attention to it, they don't even realize they're doing it. They're just trying to get closer to that person. So they lean a little bit toward them. There are things you'll see where someone didn't get the right order, and they don't want to tell the waitress or the waiter, whoever brought their coffee or whatever it is, and then they look at it, but they don't want to say anything. But you can tell that something's up, and they'll keep looking at it, and they'll look at them, and their smile will be too big, and it'll last too long, be way too big. Oh no, everything's fine. That one of those kind of things. Everything's fine. Yeah. They'll give you too much information. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things. I mean, there's millions of them. So
I think that's exactly it. You hit on it with the decoding of Lance Armstrong. When you look at it, it's a difference between looking and seeing. Because when you break it down like that, you can see so instantaneously when you look for the right things. Oh, he was uncomfortable there, or oh, he was definitely lying about something there. But most people don't put two and two together in the moment to decode.
Right. Yeah, you think later on, dang it, I don't know why I didn't do that. I don't know. And in interrogation as well, there'll always be one. Everybody's got one that got away, that got away with it, that fooled you. But you'll miss all kinds of things up front again, But Lance Armstrong, once he got comfortable with his line. He had 2 or 3, I think I talked about it, I think the setups he would use before he started line. And if you look at people when they're telling somebody, and you know them well enough to when they're telling somebody else something that isn't true, just to mess with them or whatever it is, or I can't go because I have a thing that weekend or something, so I can't go to your or help you move or whatever. You can see their little tells or cues as well. There's setups for it. Like one of Lance's was when he started lying, he'd get his thumb out and he'd say, we did this, and he'd start with his thumb and start counting down. And every time he did that I could find, he wasn't telling the truth. And your friends or people you know or people at work, they'll have those things as well. Everything else, once you get a baseline on them, once you know how they act normally every day when in all kinds of different situations, then you'll be able to see and understand when they're starting to tell you something that isn't true as well. Their tone of voice will change, the way they look at you will change, everything will change. So there's a lot to be aware of up front that a lot of people just miss.
Yep. I think just to recap some of what we've got so far is, number one is being more observant, making sure that you're paying attention, finding that baseline, whether you've known them for 2 minutes, 2 months, or 20 years, what's their normal, and then once again, being observant to those small changes and really decoding what happens there in the moment, which, I think most people, like we said before, they go on autopilot, they don't think about any of those things, and then they get shocked. They're not able to see what's coming next.
Yeah. And there's in one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, Watson's all squatted down with his dead body, and he looks up at Holmes and he says, "Hey, listen," however he talks, I'm seeing a dead guy here. I got a dead body, a guy with a hole in his head wearing a tweed jacket. That's about all I got. How do you know this guy's been married 2 times? He's from Australia, but he sort of has a South African accent. And he's the person who made this tweed coat is his niece, and she doesn't like cats. And how he likes birds, even though he has 2 dogs and lived in the city, but now he lives in the country. He would say things like, and so he said, "What are you seeing that I'm not? Are you seeing something I'm not seeing?" And so Sherlock Holmes says, "I'm seeing the same things you are. The difference is you see, but you don't observe." So observing and seeing something are completely different than what most people are on the impression that observing is. Most people are on the impression of observing just keep looking at them really, really hard. But you have to know what to look for to be able to observe it, in other words. So it's a different way of looking at things when it comes to the difference in just seeing something or looking at something and then actually observing something. I
really like that analogy. Now, earlier you mentioned Greg Hartley. If you could expand a little bit, I know you're working with him currently on a new project. If you could tell us a little bit about what you've been concocting over there.
Well, Greg mostly comes from the side of to give you a little background on Greg, he's written like a gazillion books and on body language, and his thing is coming from what makes a person when they lie, what makes them act that way? What are they doing? Something's changed. What's up? I saw them do this or that, or they were sitting like this, or all of a sudden they set up. What's making them do that? From what just happened. My thing is coming from the neurological side more, which is more what happened to your brain. Your limbic system came on and it said, "Hey, man, something's not right here," and I'm trying to distance myself from this person as I'm not telling them the truth. And why does it do that? Like we talked about the 3 things that happen before you tell a lie when it gets into your brain. And I'm more into things like the fusiform gyrus and the mid-temporal gyrus on the sides of your brain, where those are things that collect all the information you see about someone's body language. Whereas Greg couldn't care less about any of that, and he wants to know. He looks at it and says, "Why is that? Does that hurt? What's going on with that guy? Why does that make him act that way?" And he sees a lot of things a lot quicker than I will. He'll pick things up a lot faster, and be on the specific side of them. Boom! Here's what that guy. Look at that guy's shocked with the question he just got, and sometimes I won't see that till maybe a second after he does. I won't realize what's going on, but he'll even get it out sometimes beforehand. That's when we're eating somewhere or something. But he's really good at that. So our thing is we're bringing together almost two worlds of understanding body language and the nonverbal cues and tells that you'll see, and bring them together in one course, like an online course. So you can, it's like the best of both worlds put into one little world, and you learn both sides of that. So it's a really, and nobody's done that before. Nobody's come out with 2 different people and said, this person's telling you from this angle, and this person's telling you from this angle what's happening. And you you tend, from what we've seen so far, people really, they understand everything better as a whole, not just, oh, he did this, so this happened. They understand the emotional part of it. So in real time, it sort of helps them with their, what's going on. They're angry and this happened. What made them angry? This person was saying this, so that helped them, that started getting them fired up. You can see them straighten up and their brain is doing this. So it gives you a well-rounded view of what's happening from the inside out, from the things you see compared to what's actually going on. You know, a lot of times if you put those two together, it really makes a great little system to help you make decisions about what you're seeing and what's happening and what's going to happen next.
I 100% agree. I think with all of the, you know, the social skills, and whether it's communication, negotiation, body language, you have the study and what's known, and then you have the practical, and they sort of live in these two little worlds.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you can bring them together and create a solid picture of this is the facts and figures and this is how it applies in real life, then your end user experience is much better.
Exactly. And so we approach from a tactical point of view as well. And you're exactly right, because my fascination started with it when I was a kid, and my dad's a doctor. So I got more of the research and the scientific part of it, where Greg was an interrogator in the Army, and he trained the military in interrogation as well, but the hardcore stuff. And he's interrogated terrorists, and you name it, he's been there and interrogated them or it. And so it's really, that's why we call it body language tactics. So it's bodylanguagetactics.com. So if you go there, that's where it is. But it's that combination that's really proven to be fairly potent when it comes to figuring stuff out. So we're doing that, and I think we're going to be doing a book as well.
Fantastic. Now, what would you say are the top 3 skills necessary to excel in today's world, whether that's, you know, body language or communication? What would you say are some of those top 3 that aren't really taught in school?
You hear the basics of you know, first impressions, but it's the knowing how to give that first impression that lasts. I know we probably don't have enough time to go into it, but it lasts a long time, that first impression. There's studies that show that. So one of the most important things is to make sure that impression you're giving someone, even before you walk up and meet them, shake their hands, even if they see you from across the room 3 days before they actually meet you in person, it's important that you show them what you want them to see about you, in other words, so that you're pleasant, you're nice, because there's a part of their brain that grabs that and remembers that from the first time they meet you. That would be one. The next one is, once that starts with your body language, when you speak with someone or you're addressing someone or several people, how to look and act and talk and speak, so they accept what you have to say and they believe you and trust you. I think Mark went over some great things about that. He's like the master of getting like a lot of people to be into, you know, that's almost like if you want to be charismatic and you're not, get one of his books and you'll be on the way, because he's figured that out. You know, he talks about the truth plane and all those things, and that's all valid research backed up information. It's really powerful and potent. And then the third thing is keeping up those relationships, making sure everything stays secured. And is, you know, if there's a hole in that boat, make sure you get that hole plugged up and the water out of the boat. For me, that's the 3 biggies: is that first impression, the knowing what to do and how to present yourself and act around people that you're talking to, at the same time keeping an eye on them. And then shoring up the little problems you may have with those relationships as you go along. Make sure those things stay, because that's really all you've got is the people you know in the world, you know, your family and quote unquote friends. So if you got like 4 friends when you get to be my age, you're doing really well. You probably got millions, but as you get older, you'll see that there's not really as many as you had hoped there would be are real friends. So
Right.
It's important to keep those relationships intact and taken care of, keep them healthy.
Very nice. Great words of wisdom there. Now, a couple things on a personal note. Who is an inspiration for you?
Number one is my father. Like I was telling you, when he would help me understand what was going on as a child and explain those things to me. And my mother as well. We'd go, and this sounds horrible, and I shouldn't tell this about my mother. We'd go to the grocery store, and we'd sit out in front of the grocery store for about 20 minutes before we'd go in, just so she could watch people. And she'd say, look at that. You know, when this guy looks like that, I think and she would just sit there and wonder and ponder what they're thinking. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. My brother and sister and I would just sit in the car and watch too. But so she's one. And there's so many these days that are such inspirations for people to learn from and to read about and understand from their books. Greg is one, definitely. His view on the whole nonverbal thing is just incredible. There's a guy named Joe Navarro. His is excellent as well. Mark, you talked to Mark. Who else would be a good one? Yeah, there's so many. There's so many that are just really, really good, you know. But that's probably the top. The top two probably would be my parents, and then I guess Greg and Joe and Mark. Those are all these days. Those are the people you look at and go, wow, they're doing,
they're there.
Exactly what they're there as well. It's really good. I'm not by myself. You know, I'm not a freak or anything. Everything's okay. So you see those.
Now, do you have any favorite books that you would recommend for someone who wants to learn a bit about body language? And
one of the first books I always talk about is one of Greg's books, and it's called "I Can Read You Like a Book," and it's and there's one called "Lie Spotting," or "How to Spot a Liar." I believe that's the name of it. That's a really good one. Joe Navarro's book.
What
everybody is saying.
What everybody is saying, yeah.
Yeah, that's a real good one too. And you'll see people who are just getting into body language and like, I'm a body language expert. You'll see them just almost quoting stuff out of that book. It's hilarious. And when you hear that, oh man, you want to go up to them and say, listen, don't do that, man. You know, everybody knows that's from Joe's book. Yeah. So it's one of those things. Oh gosh. Anyway, so there's a lot.
Awesome. Now, last question on a personal note here. If you could have a conversation with anyone, past, present, or future, who might that be?
Tesla. Yeah, Nikola Tesla. Because I'd want to find out, a lot of those things he says, I'm really into him, have been for a long time. But I want to know if a lot of those things he was saying about when he would get these flashes of inspiration, and when he would see like the electric motor, he would see how electricity worked and all that. I want to see the look on his face when he's actually telling somebody that. I want to believe that so bad I can't hardly stand it, because he was brilliant. I mean, look at his work; he's unbelievable. But I want to be there and see him say that. You know, I'd like to catch him when he was, you know, back at Wardenclyffe, where he had the tower and all that, and be able to talk to him. Say, hey, listen, man, tell me about where'd you get the idea for this? And when he would say, Flash or whatever it came, I want to see what he's looking like. I want to see. I believe him. I want to believe that those stories so bad, but I think a lot of times you'll hear if it comes down to printing the real story or the story about the legend. They always print the legend. So I think maybe some of that stuff's been blown up, but I can't tell. So that's who I'd want to sit down and talk to for a while.
That's a great answer. I really like that one.
Yeah,
now for our audience who's watching here, if they want to find out more about you and your blog and your books and your TED Talks, what's the best way for them to find out a little bit more about you?
Just go to scottrouse.com, SCOTTROUSE.com, and you'll go right there. There's a thing I'll tell you about our online course, body language tactics, or just go to bodylanguagetactics.com and you'll see that. But that's where you can get in touch with me. And if you got any questions or anything, let me know, because I love getting, and I spend a couple of hours with it every day answering email and those types of things. So if you got a question or something, let me know.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, final question. Is there anything that you wish that I had asked, or some final words of wisdom for everybody?
Nothing I can think of. You know, I'm glad you said, it looks like you cut your own hair. Did you do that? I didn't. I just need a haircut, so. I can't think of anything that I would think that you want to ask. And final words of wisdom: pay attention to everything that's going on around you, no matter where you are, no matter what's going on. When you walk outside, start paying attention.
Just might save your life someday.
Yeah, or someone else's.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, Scott. We learned a lot. We talked about way more than just body language, which is incredible.
Thanks.
Have a difficult time writing a description about all the things that we came up with, but I truly enjoyed it. I know we've got lots of value for the audience. So I thank you for your time, for being here with us.
Well, thanks so much. And I really enjoyed it as well. I love doing these things. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And that's all. What'd you think? Let me know the favorite thing that you learned in the comments below, and if you know someone who could use a bit of inspiration or needs a touch up on their body language skills, go ahead and be a pal and send them this link. I know that they will most certainly appreciate it. Below, I've included links to Scott's website, books, and all the courses, so if there's something that we discussed that you'd like to know more about, simply read and check out that description below. Everything is in there for you. And as always, click subscribe right down there in the corner so that you never miss a video. Every Wednesday, we're releasing brand new videos with top experts and influencers so you can learn the very best tips right from the source. And don't forget, we've got open enrollment on our brand new course, Millennial Magnetism, so you can start unleashing your inner awesome. Once again, link in the description below. Until next time, ciao for now.